Hello and welcome to InspiHER'd, your grown-up girl talk. I'm Stacey Fleece, as always, with my co-host Samantha Tredelius. And Samantha, I'm glad to be back. I had a very quick trip to New Orleans, child related. But it was good. But I'm glad to be back, and I'm a little tired today, if I'm
Yeah.
being honest.
Listen, we're not built like we used to be. The boomerang
I
life.
was literally thinking that last night. I was like, God, 10, 15 years ago would not have been a problem. Today, a little bit more of a problem. Also, I had a work call scheduled for 7:30 this morning. So I got home at like midnight last night, got up, got ready, did, squared away at my desk, ready to go. 7:30 call. The guy doesn't answer.
Come
The guy
on.
did not pick up. And here's
Yeah,
here's my PSA for the day. If you schedule a call,
be there.
be there for the call. Like don't
Mhm.
don't fuck people,
Right, especially at 7 in the
especially
morning.
at
Yeah,
7:30 on a Friday
that's a
morning. Not
no for
happy
me.
about that. But listen, today, actually, we're gonna kind of dive into a little bit more of a serious topic than sometimes we do. This one's a big deal, and I think it's near and dear to a lot of our hearts, especially as moms. Um, I want to get right into it. We have with us today Ashley Hurd, who is the executive director of the Marin Foster Care Association. Ashley, first,
Hi.
thank you for being here.
Yeah.
It feels like this topic's going to get a little heavy, but there's good things happening around foster care
Mhm.
too. So we're gonna get serious, but we're gonna also celebrate the wins. And you have quite a few of them in Marin. How
Yes.
are you today?
I'm good. Thanks. I appreciate you inviting me and highlighting foster care. And I think breaking some myths people think about foster care. And I think what you said, celebrating wins. There are wins, and I've experienced in my own life. And so, yeah, I'd love to share those too.
Well,
Well,
it's also
listen,
like super long overdue, not to interrupt, because Ashley, what our listeners might not know is she's one of us, right? She's our girl. We pal around together in the nonprofit space here in Marin. And so I have loved watching you turn this thing all the way up. And I
Mhm.
remember sitting in a room with you, gosh, it feels like almost 10 years ago, where we were both just kind of like getting our feet wet here.
Mhm.
And now look at, where we're at. So
Mhm.
I can't wait to share your story from a personal perspective because I think you're a real deal badass, if
Thank
I'm being
you.
honest.
Well, likewise, the feelings are mutual.
well, and it's been going a long time for this badass, and certainly with May being Foster Care Awareness Month, we absolutely wanted to highlight you and highlight your nonprofit and the work you're doing as the executive director because you are one that really puts your money where your mouth is.
Mhm.
So I respect you and I honor you for that because I do want to go way back to like. You graduated high school and you went overseas, you went out of the country and worked and lived in an orphanage in Costa Rica. And that's, I assume, where all of this begins.
Yeah, I mean, I look back to it, and I really do think that was kind of the beginning of this passion for, being available and supporting the vulnerable youth in our community. And I was in high school, and I was like, all right, I've done all the classes I need to do. How about I can graduate early and do something else? And so I went to my counselor. She was like, "Yep, take one extra class at community college and you're done in January." And so I did. And then February I left and I went to Costa Rica, lived in a really small town, in an orphanage with we had two different buildings, and I was one of like the moms of one building and took care of 10 kids, got them up, showered to school every day, took care of their laundry, everything they needed. And that was kind of the beginning of this desire to really support these kids. Didn't know what that was going to look like back then, because my life kind of did a different turn for a decade or so, and then really found myself in foster care, and that was. But Costa Rica was really the beginning, and that orphanage is still up and running, and it's really amazing the work that they do there.
So it's at 17, 18 years old. Like what makes you go, it would be really great now that I graduated high school early. It's not like sleeping in every day or anything like that. I'm going to go to Costa Rica and I'm going to be the quote unquote mom for 10 kids every day
Mhm.
because that seems like I like what drew, okay, what drew you to that? Like how did that even
Yeah.
come into your orbit?
Yeah. I mean, so I am a woman of faith, and I would say that that was a big piece of it, was like, okay, what's my next step and how can I serve the community and the broader community? And one of my sister's friends had served at an orphanage in Costa Rica and was like, hey, she's down there teaching English. You could go down there and she could show you the ropes and basically drop you off this orphanage she used to work at. And I knew some Spanish. I had taken Spanish for in high school, and so I could speak to some degree. So I knew I had that piece of it. And then just for an adventure, I wanted to come back for prom and to walk and all of that. Um, so that was still going to happen. So I think it was like, okay, I'll do this while you all are still doing school, and then I'll come back and still kind of do all those fun things too. And so, yeah, I was really motivated as a young person. Started work at 15, and paid for my own car and paid for my way through college. And so I'd say I was pretty determined, and it was just an opportunity that popped up that I was like, that sounds pretty awesome. So
Well, I mean, listen, you you kind of have this like person inside of you, which if you ever get to meet Ashley in person, you're like, yeah, okay, I get it, right? You're just kind of this little ball of energy in all the right
Mhm.
ways. And I love it so much because I align with that mentality and lifestyle myself.
Mhm.
Um, I want to talk about the just incredible stuff that you've been able to do and the big girl like transition you have made in the last, 18 to 24 months with this organization because you've been
Mhm.
doing some really cutting edge, like super innovative, cool things that I mean, I know a lot of us know about, but the world doesn't know about. So I want to share that with you. So talk to us a little bit about just the organization and then about what you just did in the last 24 months.
Yeah, so Marin Foster Care has existed for about 10 years, 10 and a half years. And when I joined on the board, actually 5 years ago, 6 years ago, our budget was like $300,000. And we are now almost a $2 million organization. And we exist to support foster kids and their caregivers. And so we have many different programs that we have to do that. But one thing that you're talking about, Sam, is the last 2 years we saw this need for housing for our transition age foster youth. Basically, landlords and apartment owners just weren't renting to our youth here in Marin County. Affordable housing is really slim here. And so they were having to move out of county. And as you probably remember, when you were 18, you weren't ready to move away from your family, people you knew, your community, and just get plopped into a random place in the East Bay or farther out. And so we thought, okay, well, if we could purchase an apartment building and house these youth, then they could stay in Marin. And so we did that about 2.5 years ago. We purchased our first building in Novato, and it's a 10-unit apartment building, and we have 8 youth living there now, two pre-existing tenants. And then a year later we said, gosh, we really need another building and more centrally located. So we figured out a way to purchase another building in San Rafael, and so we have a 6-unit apartment building there. So we have 16 units, and now our youth can stay here and they can thrive here and they can go to school here, and they're all in great locations close to the community college and public transit. And it's really just given our kids just this like sense of really dignity, but also them knowing that people love them and that we will do what we need to do to keep them here in our community and support them in their beginning, entering into their adult life. So,
So the foster youth aging out at 18 has very consistently been a problem, and I don't know a ton about foster care. I know just
mhm,
enough to be dangerous, and certainly we've all heard a lot about the problem of when they age out and they just kind of get sent out like launch
mhm,
go, and it's
mhm.
it's just not that easy when you're 18 for a variety of reasons. If for those of us who've not had the youth challenges that they've had to live through, they've had to grow up very quickly.
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
this innovative program is amazing and for sure making a difference. Where did you guys come up with this, or are you seeing other foster care organizations around the country use this or start to employ this as a solution around that 18 gap?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So when we had an issue arise with a youth not having a place to go, and I had reached out to our county supervisors because they had said, "Hey, reach out when you have a tangible issue." So I did. I said, "Hey, this youth won't have a place in 2 weeks. Can you help us?" And they said, "Yes, let us help you with this situation, but this sounds like a bigger issue," which obviously it is. And they said, have you ever thought about buying an apartment building? And my answer was no. I never had thought about that. It was kind of never in our plan. And so I was actually Supervisor Lucan. He said, here's a link to an apartment building. Just he had Googled one, and that is actually the building we own in Novato. Took me down this huge rabbit hole. We figured out a way for the county to support, Marin Community Foundation to support the city, and then some private donors to support us to get that building. And within 3 months, we'd acquired that building. So it's not something that we knew about in other groups were doing around the state, around the nation. It is something that I now talk to other groups about because it's so doable. Like it really is doable. And people think, oh gosh, I can't own property and I can't do it. And I'm definitely here to say that you can. It's not easy. I will say owning two buildings is not the easiest thing. That's for another day, many, many stories. But it's worth it knowing that it's keeping our kids here. And so it's something that we want to replicate in other counties across the state of California.
So speaking of the other counties, because I know Marin is where you're based, but you do work in Solano and I think Sonoma as well, right?
Yeah, so we've created one of our programs is our resource center. It's like a mini Target. It houses everything you need to raise a child from 0 to 23. And we have that here in San Rafael. And so we realized a few years ago that that really is a vital resource for our families because when you get a placement, sometimes you have a 3 hour notice and you also don't have the funding to go out and buy a whole wardrobe for a kid and all the supplies and everything. So this is the resource center is the place people come right when they get a placement. So we decided to expand into 4 other counties over 3 years and create a resource center and give them the funding to get started, kind of like an angel investor, give the infrastructure, give the stuff, and now they run as their own 501(c)(3). So we
Awesome.
have a partner agency in Sonoma County, Contra Costa, Solano, and San Francisco. And it's been really amazing to see them grow because they're all growing at their own pace, but now they're all adding new programs to support the foster care community. So it all starts with the resource center. That was our first program here in Marin, and then it grows from there.
Which I find so crazy that there aren't these programs already. You know, it's not like foster care is a new thing.
Mm-mm.
It's just it's always so crazy to me that like I feel like it's women and children that are the lowest end of the totem
Mm-hmm.
pole when you look at
Mm-hmm.
like donor dollars or what it looks like. And yet
Mm-hmm.
here we are, you know, and it's like it's amazing that you're able to find this hole that you can, you know, fill the need, but I can only imagine like we're not the only state that's got this issue. And
Mm-mm.
you know, we're just kind of talking Bay Area. I mean, think about it. There's so
Yeah.
many places in even just California.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's definitely replicable, which is what we're trying to prove and to show. I was just in LA meeting with another group earlier this week and talking about, what services they have. They have so many kids in care in LA County. But the smaller counties around the state, right, that still have foster care happening. And how can we help them create something like we've created? Because a lot of times in a lot of counties, when you become a foster parent and you get a call, you get a kid dropped off and that's it. I mean, they are not giving you the social workers are working the case. They're there to ask questions and whatnot, but they're not there to help you navigate the system necessarily, ask a ton of questions about how is this going to work and also the stuff, right? The initial money that it takes to raise a child, that's just not there. And so that to me is like the basic like that we need to be providing for kids in foster care and families who are saying yes to this work because it's really, really important.
Well, and let's just get down and dirty. Let's shine a spotlight here because I think there's a lot of people that just don't even realize that this happens where they live, right? Like let's just
Hmm.
talk about Marin County, where you
Hmm.
are based. And for those of you who don't know, Marin County is just north of San Francisco on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge. It is consistently ranked one of the wealthiest counties, most expensive counties in the country.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people have this misinformation that there aren't foster kids in Marin.
Hmm.
Like it's Marin.
Hmm.
How could there be
Hmm.
foster kids? Let's talk about the numbers. What kind of numbers are we looking at just in Marin County?
Yeah, just in Marin County, we have about at any given time, we have about 120 kids in foster care. We also, as an organization, serve adoptive families as well. So we serve that population, and we also serve kids in probation, and and in guardianship. So those are folks who are there you can go two routes, adoption and guardianship. So we serve all of them. So collectively, we serve about 200 kids here in Marin County. And but traditional foster care is about 100 to 120 at any given time. And that's probably the biggest thing that people ask my husband and I when we have our foster children around. Um, or they know that we're foster parents, is like, where did the kid come from? And we're like, right here, right in your own
Down the
county. Like,
street.
Yeah.
yeah,
Two
like
doors
Yeah.
down.
all over the county. It's not two neighborhoods, it's all over the county. And that is something that I think is the biggest shock for people, especially here in Marin County, because it is such a wealthy county. They don't think that there's foster kids that live here.
Well, and I referenced earlier that you put your money where your mouth is, and your experience it leads you into this leadership position where you really talk from a place of authority because you and your husband have fostered and continue to foster children. Tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about that, how you got into that, the experience, what it's been like for you and your husband and your family.
Yeah. So when my husband and I wanted to start our family, we wanted to potentially try to have a child biologically, and we did. And then when we discussed growing our family, we thought about adoption. Both of my older sisters have both adopted, so that's kind of been in our mindset, in our family. And then we saw a press release when my biological son was 2. We saw a press release from the county that said, "Hey, we need foster homes." And my husband was like, why don't we try that? It's temporary. We can help more than one child. And so we literally just jumped in. We said, let's just give it a try, And so we went through the licensing process, and that was 11 years ago, and we've had 10 different kids come in our home, and one at a time, and they've lived with us from anywhere from 4 months to 14, 15 months, and then they either have reunified with a biological family member or they've been adopted. And it's just been a really unique, I would say hard, but really beneficial for our family, I think, and just a unique way to grow our family. And the best part is that we get to see a lot of them still. So that's really, really helpful. Now, my biological child, he's almost 13. So he's been doing this, I mean, since he was 2.5. So this is a lot of what he knows.
So I fostered a dog once because I thought that would be a good idea for me. And I was going to foster him,
Different than a child.
it is, but hold on. There's a point to this story. I fostered him. I was going to foster him for a month or two until they found him a permanent home. That was about 10 years ago, and I still have him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I am what they would call a foster fail when it comes to a dog. I can't do that anymore because I know what the end result's going to be. How do you have these kids come through your home, and how do you find the place in your heart to let them back out the door and release them? I couldn't let a dog go.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the main question I get, and I've actually really thought about writing a book about the goodbyes, because it's the main question I get is, how do you say goodbye? And there's really no easy way to say goodbye, and there's no way that you can half parent a child. And so what I say is, I let my emotions take over once I know the child is transitioning. I don't think about it until it gets closer to the actual time. And then I let myself feel those emotions. Because that's the only way I know how to grieve a loss and to let this child go. And so my last baby I had for 14 months, I got him from the hospital, and he stayed with me till he was 14 months. And the last few nights, I mean, I get emotional every time I think about it, but the last few nights I rocked him to sleep, and I just prayed over him that we would stay in touch, and that his mom would stay sober, and that she would stay strong for him, and that, his future. And then I had to let him go, um and for all of our kids, we make books for photo books for the length of time they've been with us, so that they have these memories, and that there's not a blank chapter in their lives. And every time I have to give those over to the parents, or the adoptive parents or biological parents, when I do the transition, like, that's probably the hardest time. But I think it's really important for them to see, the vulnerability of us as foster parents and what we've poured into their child. And I will say, I still see that baby. He's just turned 2, and I see him at
Oh.
least once a week. His mom and I have a really close relationship, which is really great. But we know as adults, and foster parents would tell you this, like our hearts will heal. They do. If you've ever been a breakup, like a relationship breakup, it's that feeling. That's the best feeling I can explain it. It really is like this piece of your heart is breaking, but it will heal over time and it's worth it for these kids,
Yeah.
right? Like they deserve someone to get their heart broken for them and to get so attached to them. Um, and I mean, our very first baby, she's now 10 and a half, and we are very much engaged in her life, and she very much has a connection to us, and it's just a bigger family. It's a bigger support group, for these kids. So it's the worst part. I mean, I have families, working with Marin Foster Care now. We walk through this with families as they transition, and I have a lot of families transitioning right now. And there's really no words to say. It's just to know that we're here, we're behind you. This is super hard. You gotta let your cries out. You gotta let it go because you got to get to the other side, but you have to go through that emotion.
So what's the when these families, reassume custody of their children,
Mhm.
for whatever reason, what's the percentage that the kids fall back into, a foster need? Because
Mhm.
you always hear like horror stories about,
Mhm.
these poor children that are kind of in flux because mom or
Mhm.
dad can't get it together. I mean, what's the percentage of the fallback?
Yeah, I can speak for Marin County. I would say our court system and our judges does a really good job of really trying to make sure that the new placement is going to stick
Yeah.
and they're not gonna re-enter the system. I will say in my case, we've had 10 kids, two of them have re-entered the system. So, those
Do they come
were
back to you or do they go elsewhere? Like, are you given
so
first right of refusal?
Yeah, a lot of times one of them came back to us. Her mom actually asked for us. So she came back to us, and the other one went to a grandma because the grandma was in the picture then. And we had him as a baby. He came back in at 5, and then he went back to grandma. So that's the worst case scenario, obviously, and that's not ideal. But yes, if they do come back, we always try to tell the county to reach back out to the foster parents because they have that relationship, and it's just another trauma that these kids are having to go through. So if they can land in a home that they know, I mean, I swear our 10 and a half year old, who we came at 6 months old, stiff as a board. She was super nervous coming to our house, obviously, for many reasons, but she's probably my most attached kid to me that I've ever had. And she comes to our house and she finds the cat wherever the cat is and sits and pets the cat. I mean, she knows our house, she remembers everything, and she left at 15 months old. And same thing with the little guy who's, was with us for 14 months. He comes to our house. He touches everything he's not supposed to because he knows what she's not supposed to. He goes through the house and they know. And I feel like they also have a sense of like calmness and peace when they come back because it was hopefully, like a peaceful time for them to be at our house and just a safe spot for them to land. So it's interesting to see what they remember though, because we take the little ones.
Well, and
Yeah.
I think this speaks so much to how important it is to keep them in the counties with which
Mhm.
they are, where they're born, where their families are,
Mhm.
where, I know ultimately the goal is to get that child reunited with the birth family, and
Mhm.
sending them out of the county obviously puts a big
Mhm.
challenge on that. So I think this speaks volumes to how important it is to make sure you have those foster families who are willing
Mhm.
to support these kids and keep them local,
Mhm.
and really make their transition out and back into families as easy as possible. And around that, I want to talk a little about Glitter and Groove that you have
Mhm.
coming up on May 14th. Tell us about this is your big fundraiser, your kind of your big fundraiser of the year, yeah?
Yeah, we have two fundraisers of the year, one in the fall and one in the spring. And so this one is a fun new one we added last year called Glitter and Groove, May 14th at Malibu Farm in Tiburon. It's just a really fun night. It's just meant to be kind of like let loose, have fun, but there's also, yeah, there's some fundraising too, right? We're there for a reason. And we have some really great personal stories that will be shared and really just to remind people that this exists here, right, in beautiful Tiburon and all areas of the county. And what role can you play? because to what you just said, Stacey, that it is so important to keep these kids here. We send 35% of our kids out of our county now because we don't have homes here. And I am not exaggerating when I say that. Like, we do not have enough homes here, and for all ages, not just for babies, but for teens too. And so we need more people to step up. And so it's a fun night to just kind of have fun, but then also remember what we're there for and to figure out what role you can play and encourage you to hopefully jump in some way.
And in addition to, running the Marin Foster Care, our girl Ashley also happens to be an event planner extraordinaire who
Mhm.
has spent her, career hosting and planning and doing. And so I can tell you from firsthand experience, the Marin Foster Care events they're top notch, and they're top notch for a good reason. I always love the question that I get because I too have a day job and
Mhm.
then run an
Mhm.
organization. How do you do it all?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then, it's always like a guy's not getting asked that question because
I know.
we're women and we just do it
Mhm.
all, right?
Mhm.
And I think you can definitely probably compartmentalize your time and your day and be able to like
Mhm.
go to bed every night knowing the like you did the good work.
Mhm.
Which I know is how you live as I do, but it is a
Mhm.
lot. There's a lot
Mhm.
going on in your world all the time and I know it and I see it and it's remarkable with what you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah, I do get a lot of those comments of when and how do you sleep? And after the like 20th time someone asked me that, I said, clearly something's going on that I'm showing the world that like I don't sleep or I don't know. But I do get 8 hours of sleep every night. But I am working, I feel like, or doing things or strategizing until I lay my head on the pillow. And then when I wake up and that's like, go, go, go. It's just kind of it's just my personality. It's how I was built. But I love what I do. And yeah, I love doing events, and I have that whole creative side, which is fun, and work with a bunch of other nonprofits doing events in the Bay Area. And then I love, doing the foster care world and being a part of that and helping inspire people to jump in and to support that too.
So I always like to ask, like, what's the hardest part of your job? Like, it could be event world, it could be, executive director world. But what is the hardest part about like your existence? Like, what's
Yeah.
one pain point?
I would say the hardest part is with the foster care world, I would say is carrying all the emotions of everyone. I
Yeah.
think yeah, I try to stay high level as the executive director. I have a great team of people who implement our programs, but at the end of the day, I have really great relationships with a lot of foster families, and so they come and sit in my office for hours on end. And there's just a lot going on, right? Like, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of heartache. It's hard work. I always say this, like, we were not invented for foster care. Like, the world didn't exist for foster care, right? Taking a kid, removing it, getting super attached, removing that attachment, like, that's not how we were created. So of course it's going to be messy and hard and emotional. And so I think it's really helpful that I actually run two different things so that I can be distracted a little bit with like the fun creative for other nonprofits, and then we can dive in and support and listen to all of that what's going on. But that's probably the hardest thing, is also to just detach from it, because I get texts and calls all hours of the day, right? Because foster care doesn't turn off at 5. Um, and that is probably the hardest, because I also want to jump in and help. I'm a like problem solver and a doer. So it's like, how can I help this problem? And you're struggling here. So what can I do here? And so that's the hardest part. I think there's just a lot of need. And when you jump into need, you're gonna see more need, right? And that, like, so that's the hardest part, I think. But it also inspires me to do more and to create more programs and to raise more money and inspire more people.
Yeah.
So
But it's also a
Find
heavy lift and it's a heavy lift
yeah.
on, I mean, those emotions are real and raw and it's one thing to really put them over here for,
Mhm.
be like the business person, but like,
Mhm.
I even see it and Stacey, I know we've all seen it from the work that we do. It's like it
Mhm.
does affect you and
Totally.
sometimes harder than other times.
Hmm.
And so thank you for being like raw with that because
Yeah.
it's real. It's real
Yeah.
from an executive director standpoint when you're dealing with families
Mhm.
and young kids. It's hardcore, man.
Mhm. Yep. And someone mentioned recently, like, really being mindful about self-care. And so actually from one of your events, all the product you gave us, I think Jeannie mentioned like have a little spa in your bathroom. And I really took that to heart, honestly.
Yes.
So
Yes,
like
ma'am.
I do that. Like I do that with all the product and all the things just to have it in my bathroom because I'm like, this is the time I'm gonna have, right? And it's so important for our moms and our families to do that, especially people like us who wear different multiple hats. So
Yeah, it's this life we're living is tough, but
mhm.
knowing that we're doing the good work and the impact on the other side, I think that's what really keeps us inspired and hopefully our
Yeah.
listeners as well. MarinFosterCare.org is where you can find a little bit more about the information, sign up for the events if you want to get involved, becoming a foster family, donating money, bringing items to the what do we call it? It's the store. What's the store called?
The resource center
The
in San
Resource
Rafael.
Center, yes.
Yeah.
All those things can be found there, also on Instagram. Ashley, you are a girl I always smile when I get to see, and I'm so glad that we got to chat with you today. We hope that everybody gets out there this week, this month, this year, and is inspired.